My ultra-wealthy boss tried to publicly humiliate me, so I humiliated her back. But just when I thought it was over, she got revenge and I learned just how cruel the rich can be. When I was 21, I got my first job as a nanny, but not just any nanny. No, I was a nanny to a rich family. Like the top 1% rich. I worked 12-hour-a-day shifts for them, so the family had full trust in me. After the first few weeks, they even stopped hiding all of the expensive jewelry from me and left me alone in the house without turning on the security cameras. So one day, the mom, Linda, asked if I could organize a party for her. She offered to pay $800, so I immediately accepted. She told me I was allowed to come too, but only if I didn't tell anyone I was a nanny. This seemed a little strange at first, but still I accepted, mainly because I had never had a boyfriend before, and I was hoping to meet a rich, handsome guy. The weeks leading up to it were tiring. It honestly felt like I was organizing a wedding or something. Every detail had to be accounted for. The flowers, the flower pots, the outdoor umbrella colors, the types of glasses, everything. And while I was at the house organizing everything, I would sometimes hear Linda on the phone, bragging to her friends about how, well, she's managing, juggling, raising 3 babies, all while planning an elegant party. I never caught what the other side said, but it always sounded like they were impressed. This irked me, but I shrugged it off, because I get paid anyway, and the money was amazing. But in the days leading up to the party, Linda started acting strange. She started barking orders at me, and even threw a water bottle at me when I wasn't setting the table fast enough. Usually she was very patient, kind, soft-spoken, but now she was acting crazy. One time, the kids even came to me crying and asking why mommy was being so mean. That's when I knew it wasn't just in my head. I managed to soothe them and take their minds off it by playing with them and tiring them out, and it never came up again until the day of the party. I still remember how I felt wearing my $300 dress with coordinated shoes and jewelry. Younger me would be so proud, I thought to myself. At that moment, life was sweet, and as my car pulled into their driveway, I was starstruck. There was a crowd filled with suits and elegant dresses, all talking and laughing. Inside, the chandeliers were shining onto the tables filled with all kinds of amazing food. I actually felt like a princess. Then, Linda came up to me. I could still see the tension in her eyes, but she smiled at me and introduced me to her friends. Everything was going smoothly, until there was a slight lull in the conversation, because that's when Linda striked. You know, Lily over here had her first baby over 2 years ago, and still doesn't know how to change a diaper. Everyone laughed like it was the funniest joke of all time. I didn't want to be the mood dampener, so I forced a laugh to be polite. Then Linda kept going. She can't even stop her kids from crying without calling her nanny. And one time when her nanny didn't pick up, she had to call me. Remember that, Lily? The group was laughing so hard that one of them almost dropped their champagne. Linda, I don't know how you do it. 3 years and not even a single nanny. You're an inspiration. Suddenly, the entire group was singing Linda's praises. I had every intention of going along with Linda's plan, but that's when things escalated. Soon, everyone was keeled over laughing while Linda called me lazy, useless, a bad mother, and hopeless, all in the form of a joke. And when the spotlight turned back to her, and about how her years of parenting classes had finally paid off, I stole it back. I excused myself to find the kids, and when I did, I made them cry. Nothing crazy, I just started making funny faces. As usual, 2 of them laughed. Then the 3rd child started to cry because he felt left out and didn't know what was going on. And soon, all of them started crying louder than a baby on an airplane. Hey Linda, I think your kids are crying. Why don't you show us what your parenting classes have taught you and get them to stop? Her eyes went wide and I saw a wave of panic fill her bones. Practically half the party was already watching as she went to go get them. She picked one of them up and started swinging him back and forth. This made him start to scream, and the other 2 followed suit. Within seconds, the entire house was silent, watching Linda not know how to comfort her own children. I just stood there with a smirk plastered on my face until she finally gave me the look. Within seconds, they were smiling and laughing again. Her friends immediately broke into uproar about what a natural I was. Everyone was asking if I could be their nanny, offering 2 and 3 times what Linda was paying me. I was over the moon. But little did I know, Linda wouldn't let me get away so easily. And it wasn't long before she taught me exactly what secrets rich people are hiding. The day after the party was when the retaliation began. I woke up to 3 missed calls from Linda, followed by a text that simply read, "You're fired. Return the house key today." I wasn't surprised, but what did shock me was walking into my apartment's lobby that afternoon to find a delivery man with a massive arrangement of exotic flowers. The card read, "Loved your style last night. Let's talk opportunities. Madison Montgomery," along with a phone number. Madison had been one of the most elegantly dressed women at the party, dripping in diamonds that probably cost more than my entire college education. While I was contemplating whether to call her, Linda took things to the next level. By that evening, I discovered she'd already begun spreading rumors through the wealthy community that I'd stolen jewelry from her home. The first hint came when my friend Sophia, who worked as a personal assistant to another family in the same social circle, texted me asking if I was okay. "Everyone's talking about the pendant you supposedly took from Linda's master bedroom," she wrote, which sent my heart racing because I'd never even touched Linda's jewelry. I immediately called Linda, my hands shaking with rage and fear, but she answered with a sickeningly sweet voice, explaining that misunderstandings happen, but she'd already filed a police report as required by her insurance. This wasn't just about getting fired anymore. She was trying to destroy my reputation and possibly get me arrested. In a panic, I called Madison, who answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting for my call. "I've been expecting to hear from you," she said, her voice calm and collected. Linda's quite predictable when her ego gets bruised. Madison invited me to meet her for lunch the next day at a restaurant whose name I recognized from celebrity gossip magazines. I spent the night documenting everything about my employment with Linda, taking screenshots of texts where she praised my work with the children, and even found photos I'd taken of the kids during our activities that showed clear timestamps and locations. The next morning, I dressed in the nicest outfit I owned, which felt painfully inadequate compared to what I'd seen at the party, and headed to meet Madison. The restaurant was even more intimidating than I'd imagined, with a doorman who eyed my non-designer outfit suspiciously until I mentioned Madison's name, which instantly transformed his demeanor. Madison was already seated at a corner table, wearing sunglasses indoors and a casual outfit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. "Linda's already called everyone who was at the party," Madison explained while sipping her sparkling water, "telling them you're a thief who manipulated her children against her." She leaned forward, removing her sunglasses to reveal sharp, calculating eyes. "But here's what you don't understand about our world. Linda isn't well liked. She's tolerated because her husband has connections everyone wants access to." Madison explained that she ran a high-end staffing agency for wealthy families, placing nannies, housekeepers, and personal assistants with the elite, and she'd been watching me carefully at the party. "You handled those children beautifully, and you stood up to Linda with class," she said, offering me a job with one of her client families at nearly triple what Linda had paid me. "There was one condition, though. I needed to clear my name first, and Madison had a plan for that." What followed was a crash course in how the wealthy fight their battles. Madison introduced me to her friend Aiden, a lawyer whose services typically cost $1,000 per hour, but who agreed to help me for the entertainment value of watching Linda squirm. Together, they crafted a cease and desist letter regarding the false accusations, coupled with a demand for a written retraction to be sent to everyone in their social circle. To my surprise, Linda caved almost immediately, sending a group email claiming there had been a misunderstanding about the missing jewelry, which had been located in her safe all along. But the damage to my reputation wasn't so easily repaired, and Linda wasn't finished with me yet. My new position with Madison's client family, the Harringtons, who had twin 4-year-olds, was going wonderfully for about 2 weeks, until Mrs. Harrington approached me one morning with an uncomfortable expression. "We've received some concerning information about you," she said gently, showing me printed screenshots of what appeared to be my social media accounts with posts showing drug use, explicit content, and even racist comments. My stomach dropped as I stared at the images. They were sophisticated fakes using my photos, but creating entirely fabricated posts I'd never made. This had Linda written all over it, but proving it would be nearly impossible. Mrs. Harrington, unlike Linda, was kind enough to listen to my explanation and agreed to give me time to address the situation. I immediately called Madison, who sighed deeply when I described what happened. "Classic Linda move," she said, and instructed me to meet her at a small, unmarked office building downtown. There, I was introduced to DT, a former hacker who now ran a legitimate cybersecurity firm catering to the privacy needs of the ultra-wealthy. DT was surprisingly young, maybe early 30s, with bright blue hair and more tattoos than bare skin visible. "Rich people problems require rich people solutions," DT quipped as she began working to trace the source of the fake posts and document proof that they were fabricated. Within a day, she had confirmed the posts were created through a VPN, but had tracked enough digital breadcrumbs to suggest someone had accessed them from Linda's home network. This wasn't enough proof for legal action, but it was enough for Madison's purposes. The next phase of Madison's plan introduced me to the real power dynamics of wealth. She arranged a lunch with several of the women from the party, including Molly Westfield, who I learned was married to the CEO of the bank that held the mortgage on Linda's husband's investment properties. Over elegant salads and sparkling water, Madison casually brought up the troubling pattern of behavior Linda had been displaying. Molly seemed particularly concerned, mentioning that her husband had been considering some changes to their banking relationships due to character concerns with certain clients. I realized with a chill that these women weren't just gossiping. They were systematically dismantling Linda's social and financial connections. By the end of the lunch, plans had been made to exclude Linda from 3 upcoming charity events, which Madison explained was essentially social death in their circle. Meanwhile, the Harringtons had decided to keep me on after DT provided them with a detailed analysis, proving the social media posts were fake. Their trust meant everything to me, and I threw myself into caring for their twins with renewed dedication. 2 months passed in relative calm. I was settling into my new role, which included traveling with the Harringtons to their vacation home in the Hamptons and their ski chalet in Vermont. The pay was incredible, the family respectful, and Madison had become something of a mentor to me. I almost forgot about Linda until one sunny afternoon when I took the twins to the local park, a fancy place with private security and a membership requirement that catered to wealthy families. Across the playground, I spotted Linda with her 3 children, and our eyes met in a frozen moment of mutual recognition. Her expression shifted from shock to fury in an instant, and she immediately gathered her children and stormed toward me. What happened next showed me just how calculated rich people's revenge can be. Instead of making a scene, Linda smiled warmly, greeting me as if we were old friends, then bent down to talk to the Harrington twins. "Hello, darlings," she cooed in a sugary voice. "Did you know your nanny used to take care of my children too? Would you like to hear a secret about her?" Before I could intervene, she whispered something to them that made their little eyes widen. Then she straightened up, gave me a venomous smile, and walked away with her children. That evening, Mrs. Harrington called me into her study, her expression troubled. "The twins told me something concerning today," she began, and my heart sank as she repeated what Linda had told them, that I had been fired from her home for touching things that didn't belong to me, and that I made her children cry on purpose. While Mrs. Harrington didn't seem entirely convinced, I could see the seeds of doubt had been planted. The trust I'd worked so hard to build was fracturing. I called Madison in tears, explaining what had happened. Her response was immediate and decisive. "It's time to end this." The next day, Madison introduced me to Sage Donovan, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the sharpest eyes I'd ever seen. Sage, I learned, was a fixer, someone wealthy people hired when they needed problems to disappear quietly. "I don't do anything illegal," she clarified immediately, "but I do know everyone's secrets." Sage explained that she had been keeping files on Linda and her husband for years, initially as part of her work for a client who had considered going into business with him. What she revealed next stunned me. Linda's husband had been systematically hiding assets ahead of a planned divorce, and Linda herself had been having an affair with her personal trainer. "Information is currency," Sage said calmly, sliding a USB drive across the table to Madison. "Use it wisely." Madison's plan was elegant in its simplicity. She arranged a small dinner party at her penthouse apartment, inviting the Harringtons, Linda and her husband, and several other key figures from their social circle. I was there not as a nanny, but as Madison's assistant, dressed in a borrowed designer outfit and briefed extensively on how to behave. The evening progressed pleasantly until dessert, when Madison skillfully steered the conversation toward the topic of loyalty. "I've always believed that how people treat those who work for them reveals their true character," she said, looking pointedly at Linda. "For example, falsely accusing a former employee of theft or spreading manufactured evidence to damage their reputation." The table fell silent as Madison continued, detailing exactly what Linda had done to me, presenting DT's evidence of the fake social media posts, and finally turning to Linda's husband. "And Robert, I wonder if Linda has been as dishonest with you as she has been with everyone else at this table." What followed was like watching a perfectly orchestrated demolition. Madison revealed just enough about the affair and the financial deceptions to set both Linda and her husband into a panic, each suddenly more concerned with protecting themselves than attacking me. The Harringtons watched the unfolding drama with wide eyes, Mrs. Harrington occasionally glancing at me with new understanding. By the end of the evening, Linda and her husband left separately, Linda in tears and Robert in cold fury. The following week was a whirlwind. Robert filed for divorce, triggering the very asset investigations Linda had been trying to avoid. The personal trainer's wife went public with the affair, causing a scandal that dominated the local gossip. Madison, true to her word, had ended it. Linda was too consumed with saving her marriage, reputation, and financial security to continue her vendetta against me. The Harringtons, now fully understanding what had happened, apologized for doubting me and even gave me a substantial bonus as a gesture of good faith. Just when I thought things had finally calmed down, I received a text from an unknown number. "You have no idea who you're messing with. This isn't over." The message was followed by a photo of me entering my apartment building, clearly taken that same day. Shaken, I showed Madison, who immediately arranged for a security expert named Nova to assess my apartment. Nova discovered 2 hidden cameras in my home, one in the living room and one in the hallway. "Professional installation," Nova muttered as she removed them. "Someone paid good money for this." The invasion of privacy left me terrified, unable to sleep and jumping at shadows. Madison insisted I temporarily move into her guest apartment while Nova's team swept for additional surveillance and secured my home. During this time, Madison revealed more about her background. She had once been in a position similar to mine, working for a wealthy family who had tried to destroy her when she refused the husband's advances. "Rich people think their money makes them untouchable," she explained, "until they meet someone richer or smarter." A week later, things escalated dramatically. I was helping the Harrington twins with an art project when Mrs. Harrington rushed in, her face pale. "There's a police officer here," she whispered, looking stunned. "He says they're investigating you for stalking and threatening Linda's family." The officer was professional but firm, explaining that Linda had filed a restraining order against me based on a series of threatening emails and multiple instances of me allegedly being spotted near their home. The evidence included emails that appeared to come from my account and blurry security footage of someone approximately my height and build. Once again, I was being framed, but this time with potential legal consequences. The Harringtons stood by me, providing an alibi for several of the alleged stalking incidents when I had been working in their home. Madison immediately activated her network, calling Aiden the lawyer and Nova the security expert to build my defense. DT dug into the emails, quickly determining they had been sent through a sophisticated spoofing technique that made them appear to come from my account. What none of us expected was for the situation to suddenly pivot when Robert, Linda's husband, contacted Madison directly. "Linda's gone too far," he said during a private meeting I was allowed to attend. "She's not just targeting you anymore. She's having me followed, threatening to expose financial matters to the IRS, and I believe she's the one who planted those cameras in your apartment." His concern wasn't for me, of course, but for himself. Linda had become a liability he needed to neutralize. Robert provided evidence that Linda had hired a private investigator who specialized in surveillance and digital framing. This evidence, combined with what DT had uncovered, was enough to get the restraining order dismissed and opened the possibility of filing charges against Linda for filing a false police report. But the nightmare still wasn't over. Coming home from work one evening, I found my apartment door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, I called Nova instead of entering. She arrived with security personnel who cleared the apartment before allowing me inside. The place had been thoroughly ransacked, furniture slashed, walls damaged, and most disturbingly, threatening messages written in what looked like red paint across my bedroom wall. The police were skeptical when I suggested Linda was responsible, pointing out that wealthy women like her typically don't commit burglary and vandalism themselves. What they didn't understand was how obsession can drive even the privileged to desperate acts. Security footage from the building was conveniently corrupted during the time frame of the break-in, but a neighbor reported seeing a woman in a headscarf and large sunglasses hurrying away around the estimated time of the incident. The description could have matched Linda, but it was too vague for identification. Madison had reached her limit. "This ends now," she declared, setting in motion what she called her nuclear option. She explained that within their social circle existed an informal but powerful council of influencers, old money families who dictated who was accepted and who was ostracized. Madison had avoided involving them until now, considering it too extreme, but Linda's escalating behavior had crossed every line. 3 days later, I was invited to attend a charity gala as Madison's guest. The event was being held at the home of the Blackwells, an elderly couple whose family had apparently owned half of Manhattan at some point in history. The opulence made Linda's home look middle class by comparison. Linda and Robert were also in attendance, though notably arriving separately. Throughout the evening, I noticed Linda being systematically isolated. Conversations conversations stopping when she approached, people excusing themselves when she joined groups. Madison explained that word had been quietly spread about Linda's behavior, not as gossip, but as a safety concern. "The one thing this circle won't tolerate is unpredictability," Madison whispered. "They can forgive greed, affairs, even occasional criminality if it's discreet, but erratic, escalating behavior that might bring attention or scandal, that's unforgivable." The climax came when Mrs. Blackwell, a tiny woman in her 70s with more authority than anyone I'd ever met, publicly addressed the situation during her speech. Without naming names, she spoke about standards of conduct and how those who cannot maintain basic decency find themselves unwelcome in civilized society. Her gaze fixed directly on Linda during these remarks, creating a moment so uncomfortable that several guests physically stepped away from Linda as if her fall from grace might be contagious. By the end of the evening, Linda was completely shunned. I almost felt sorry for her until I remembered the cameras in my apartment, the ransacking, the false police report. Linda's expression as she left the gala alone was one I'll never forget, a mixture of fury, humiliation, and the dawning realization that she had lost everything that mattered to her socially. I thought this would be the end, that Linda would retreat to lick her wounds and focus on her divorce proceedings. I was wrong. 3 days after the gala, I received a call from Madison at an unusually early hour. "Check your email," she said, her voice tense. In my inbox was a message from an anonymous sender containing a video file. When I played it, I felt physically ill. It was a carefully edited montage that appeared to show me abusing the Harrington twins, yelling at them, roughly handling them, and neglecting them while they cried. The footage had been created using sophisticated deepfake technology, combining actual video from the Harringtons' home security system with manipulated images and audio. Attached was a simple message: "This goes to the police and the Harringtons in 24 hours, unless you publicly confess to fabricating all allegations against Linda." I forwarded everything to Madison, DT, and Aiden, my hands shaking so badly I could barely use my phone. Within an hour, they had assembled at Madison's apartment. DT confirmed it was deepfake technology, but of such high quality that proving it would require time and specialized expertise. "This isn't amateur work," she explained grimly. "Someone paid top dollar for this." The 24-hour deadline made everything more complicated. Aiden advised that we should alert the Harringtons immediately before they could be blindsided. When shown the video, Mrs. Harrington broke down in tears, not because she believed it, but because she was horrified at how realistic it looked. "Our own security footage," Mr. Harrington kept saying, trying to understand how their supposedly secure system had been compromised. What happened next revealed the final secret of the wealthy that I hadn't yet learned. When truly backed into a corner, they don't necessarily fight fair. Madison made a call to someone she referred to only as an old friend, speaking in vague terms about needing the kind of help we discussed after the Marseille situation. 2 hours later, a man named Drax arrived at Madison's apartment. With his immaculate suit and refined accent, he looked like he belonged in their world, but there was something different about him, a hardness in his eyes that suggested experience beyond luxury and privilege. Drax examined all the evidence we had gathered about Linda's escalating harassment campaign, paying special attention to the deepfake video. He asked detailed questions about Linda's routines, her current living situation now that she and Robert were separated, and who might have access to her accounts and devices. Then he left with a simple, "I'll handle this." I never learned exactly what Drax did, but the results were immediate and devastating for Linda. By that evening, the anonymous email account sent a new message: "I withdraw my threat and all future actions against you. This matter is concluded." The next day, Linda abruptly sold her house, withdrew her children from their exclusive private school, and according to Madison's sources, moved to a small town in Oregon where she had family. Robert, now proceeding with the divorce uncontested, told acquaintances that Linda had experienced a health crisis, requiring a complete lifestyle change. The wealthy community accepted this explanation without question, the scandal quickly replaced by newer, fresher gossip. No charges were ever filed against Linda, no public accusations made. She simply vanished from the social landscape as completely as if she'd never existed. In the aftermath, I continued working for the Harringtons, who had stood by me throughout the ordeal. Madison became not just a mentor, but a friend, occasionally inviting me to events where I gradually became familiar with the unspoken rules and subtle power dynamics of their world. I never saw Linda again, though occasionally I would receive a notification that someone from Oregon had viewed my social media profiles. As for what secrets the rich are hiding, they're often the same ones everyone else has: infidelity, insecurity, financial troubles, family dysfunction, just with more zeros attached to the price tags and more resources to keep them buried. But the biggest secret I learned is that their greatest fear isn't losing their money, it's losing their place in the hierarchy, being excluded from the very circles that validate their worth. And they'll go to almost any length to prevent that fall from grace, even if it means destroying someone like me who accidentally glimpsed behind the curtain. Sometimes at night, I still check my apartment for cameras and sleep with one eye open, wondering if Linda will ever decide to return and finish what she started. But then I remember Madison's words the last time I expressed this fear. The thing about people like Linda is that once they lose everything, they rarely have the resources, financial, social, or psychological, to climb back up and seek revenge. They just find new, smaller ponds where they can feel like a big fish again. I hope she's right, but I've learned enough about the secrets of the wealthy to know that nothing is ever truly finished until they decide it is. I stared at my phone for a few minutes, lost in those thoughts. My apartment felt too empty now, and the silence was getting to me. I shook my head and grabbed my keys. I needed fresh air, but I needed to move. The building's elevator was out again. I took the stairs 2 at a time. Outside, the evening air hit my face. It felt good after being cooped up all day. I started walking with no real destination. The neighborhood had changed since I first moved here. New coffee shops replaced old diners. Fancy boutiques stood where family stores once were. I passed a group of college kids laughing. They looked so carefree. I couldn't remember the last time I felt that way. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and it was Madison calling. I almost didn't answer. But Madison had been right about everything so far. I hit accept and put the phone to my ear. She was talking before I could say hello. Something about new documents she'd found, and something about Linda's offshore accounts. I told her I needed a break from all this. She went quiet for a moment, and then she understood. We agreed to meet tomorrow instead, and I hung up and kept walking. The local park came into view, and I headed toward it without thinking. The park was mostly empty this time of evening, a few dog walkers, and a couple on a bench. I found an empty spot under a tree. The grass was a bit damp, and I didn't care. I sat down and leaned against the trunk. My mind kept racing back to everything that happened. It started 6 months ago with that email. Just a simple message from a name I didn't recognize. The attachment changed everything. Financial records showing Linda's company was stealing client funds. I didn't believe it at first. And Linda was my mentor, my boss, and someone I trusted. I deleted the email, and 3 days later, another one came. More proof, and more details. Then another, and another. Each one made it harder to ignore. I finally showed Madison, our firm's compliance officer. She didn't seem surprised, and she had suspicions for months. We spent weeks gathering more evidence, and late nights in the office, secret meetings in parking garages, copying files when no one was looking. The whole thing felt like a bad movie, but it was real, and too real. When we had enough proof, we went to the board. They didn't believe us at first, and Linda was too respected, too powerful, and too connected, but the evidence was solid and undeniable. The board called an emergency meeting, and Linda walked in confident as always. She left broken. The company announced her resignation the next day. The SEC investigation started a week later, and her assets were frozen, her reputation destroyed, and her friends vanished overnight. I watched a person I admired crumble in real time. It wasn't satisfying like I thought it might be. It was just sad, and a drop of rain hit my face, then another, and I looked up at the darkening sky. I should head back. I stood up and brushed off my pants. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, and something made me answer. Silence on the other end, and then breathing, then a click, and the call ended. Probably a wrong number, but it left me feeling uneasy. I walked faster toward my apartment, and the rain started coming down harder. I broke into a jog. By the time I reached my building, I was soaked. The lobby was empty except for the night doorman. He nodded as I passed, and I took the stairs again. Exercise helped clear my head, and I reached my floor breathing hard. The hallway was dimly lit as usual, and I approached my door and stopped. Something wasn't right, and the door was slightly ajar. I never leave my door open, and never. I stood there frozen, and called the police, check it myself, and run. I pushed the door open slowly, and the lights were off. I reached for the switch, and nothing happened. Power out, and I used my phone's flashlight. The beam swept across the room, and everything looked normal at first glance. Then I noticed the papers. All my case files were spread across the floor. My laptop was gone. The drawer where I kept the backup drives was open, empty, and someone knew what they were looking for. I backed out of the apartment quickly, and I called Madison while watching the stairwell. She answered on the first ring, and I kept my voice low, explained what happened. She told me to get out of the building, meet her at our backup spot, and don't talk to anyone. I hung up and headed for the stairs. The doorman looked surprised to see me leaving so soon. I mumbled something about forgetting an important meeting. His eyes followed me all the way out. The rain had stopped, and the streets were wet and reflective. I kept looking over my shoulder, and every person seemed suspicious. Every car might be following me, and I took a random path, down one street, and up another, through an alley, and past a 24-hour diner. I doubled back twice to make sure no one was tailing me. The backup spot was a storage unit Madison rented under a fake name. We set it up when things first got serious with Linda's case, just in case. And I never thought we'd actually need it. The facility was in a commercial area, and mostly closed businesses at this hour. I punched in the gate code, and the gate slid open slowly, too slowly. I slipped through as soon as I could fit. Our unit was in the back corner, and away from the cameras. I used the key Madison had given me months ago. The padlock was stiff from disuse, and it finally opened with a click. I rolled up the door just enough to duck inside. Madison was already there, and a small battery lantern lit the space. She had her laptop open. Her face looked grim in the harsh light. She didn't waste time with greetings, and she showed me what she'd found. Linda had another account we missed, and a big one, in the Caymans. The money trail led to some concerning places. People you don't want to owe favors to. People who solve problems permanently. And my break-in wasn't random. It was a warning, and/or a first attempt. Madison had moved all her important stuff here days ago. She suspected something like this might happen, and she always thinks 3 steps ahead. That's why she's still alive in this business. We spent the next hour making plans, and we needed to disappear for a while. Let things cool down. We had enough evidence backed up in secure locations. The authorities had what they needed, but our part was done. Madison had cash ready, and burner phones, prepaid cards, and even fake IDs. I was impressed and a little scared by her level of preparation. We decided to split up, and harder to track 2 moving targets. We'd meet up in 2 weeks at a predetermined location. Until then, minimal contact, and no electronic communication. Old school protocols only. And I left first. The night air felt different now. So dangerous. Every shadow could hide a threat. I walked 6 blocks before finding a taxi. I gave the driver an address 3 neighborhoods away from my actual destination. I watched out the back window the whole ride. No one seemed to be following. I paid cash and walked the remaining distance. The motel was exactly the kind of place no one asks questions. Faded sign, and cracked parking lot. Weekly rates available. I registered under one of the names on the ID Madison gave me. Paid for 3 nights up front. The room smelled like old cigarettes and cheap cleaner. The bed sagged in the middle, and the TV only got 4 channels. It was perfect, and no one would look for me here. I didn't sleep much that night. Every noise in the hallway made me jump. Every car in the parking lot might be them. Morning came after what felt like days. and I needed to keep moving. Staying in one place too long was dangerous. I showered quickly, and the water barely got warm. I put on clothes from the small bag I had grabbed during our storage unit meeting. Nothing fancy, and nothing memorable. Just another face in the crowd. And I checked out early. The front desk guy barely looked up from his phone. I walked 3 blocks to a bus stop, took the first bus that came, and didn't matter where it was going. Just needed to move, but needed to blend in. The bus was half full, and regular people going to regular jobs. I envied their normal lives, and their normal problems. I got off downtown, bought a cheap baseball cap at a tourist shop, found a diner with poor lighting and a back exit, ordered coffee and eggs, and watched the street through the window. No familiar faces, and no one paying too much attention. The waitress refilled my coffee without asking, and I left cash on the table. Included a good tip. No reason to be memorable for being cheap. I spent the next week moving around the city, never staying anywhere more than one night, and always paying cash, always watching, and always ready to run. I called Madison once from a payphone, and our agreed check-in. 3 rings, hang up, call back, and she answered with our code phrase. She was okay, and still moving, still watching, and still alive. We kept the call under 30 seconds, and long enough to confirm status, not long enough to trace. And on day 9, I saw him, the doorman from my building. He was across the street from the coffee shop where I was sitting, too far from my building to be a coincidence. He was looking at storefronts and pretending to window shop, but his eyes kept scanning the street and looking for someone, looking for me. And I left my coffee half finished, walked out the back through the kitchen, and the staff yelled something. I ignored them, and I kept moving, down an alley, and through a department store, out another exit, and I took a subway going north, then a bus going east, and then I walked south for an hour. My feet hurt, and my nerves were shot, but I was still free, and still moving. I found a new motel, and different part of town, different name on the registry.